Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of the Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys checking today's video out. Guys, today we're going to be talking about fishing line and how to choose the correct pound test of fishing line for some different lure categories. Sort of give you guys a foundational approach on fishing line if you're not real familiar with it, if you're just getting started out. So I think that's going to be some good info for there. So real quick, guys, I'd like to invite everybody, one of the good ways you can help support the Fishing Teacher here is become a member of the channel. And if you're interested in becoming a channel member, all you have to do is go to the About section of my YouTube channel, of the Fishing Teacher homepage, click on the link to the memberships, or there's a little button that says join on my YouTube homepage. You can click that for information. So much appreciated with that. Okay guys, let's talk a little bit about fishing line. Now, specifically what I want to talk about today is just like fluorocarbon fishing line. This is the line I use all the time. It's the Seagar Invisex fluorocarbon line. If you guys want to try some of this, I'll put that Baitworks link in the description. You guys can get you a spool there and check it out. But probably 95% of my fishing is with the Seagar Invisex fluorocarbon line. And the other 5% is a combination of the braided line and maybe monofilament for topwaters. But specifically, I want to talk about fluorocarbon because, guys, fluorocarbon is the best line that you can use for fishing overall. It's the properties of it. It's low diameter, it's low stretch, it's invisible, it's extremely sensitive. It's just a premium product for fishing just about any type of lure category out there. But really what I want to talk about is we could do an hour-long seminar on this, but I wanted to give you guys sort of a foundational approach on how to pick the right pound test line and some of the factors that go into that. Now, first of all, you got two different type of lure categories when you're considering, actually two or three, when you're considering the fishing line. You have lures that the action is affected by the line size. Say, for example, like a crankbait or a jerkbait or something that has a swimming action, a swim bait or something like that. And then you have lures that the action is not affected by it, like a jig or a plastic worm. Now, the rate of fall may be affected, but the action is not. And then you have some lure categories, maybe like a chatterbait or a spinnerbait or a buzzbait, that's sort of in between on that. So the first consideration, let's talk a little bit about crankbaits and jerkbaits, baits that have lips on it. If you're using a bait that has a lip on it, the line size and the line diameter that you choose for that is going to affect a couple different things. It's going to affect the depth that the bait runs, and it's going to affect the wobble on it. In general, well, not in general, pretty much all the time, the heavier pound test line that you use on a lipped lure like a crankbait or jerkbait, the bait's going to run shallower, and it's also going to lose a little bit of its side-to-side action. That's sort of the byproduct of going to heavier line. And on the other end of the spectrum, the lighter line you use, the deeper the bait's going to go, and it's going to give it a little bit more action. Now, sometimes you need both. Now, it doesn't affect the action a lot. If it affects the action a little bit, it affects the depth of the bait more than anything else. And sometimes that's a good thing and a bad thing. Say, for example, it's cold and the water's clear and you need to get that bait down deep. And of course, the neighbors start mowing their lawn as soon as I do this video, so sorry about that, guys. But anyway, sometimes in certain situations like clear water or cold water, you want to get that bait down deeper. So in those situations, you'll be using light line. And then say, for example, if you're fishing shallow, dirty water, like lay down trees or stumps like that, where the water is just a couple feet deep, you don't want that bait to go very deep, so you can get away with a little bit heavier line. That's sort of a rule of thumb there. Also, which sort of applies to everything we'll talk some more about, is if you have a lot of heavy cover around, like grass beds or trees or something like that, sometimes you need to use a little bit heavier line so the fish won't break you off. Now, if you're using a bait like say a shaky head or a jig or a Texas rig, something you're bouncing along the bottom, the action of that lure is not affected by your line size, but the rate of fall is. Because sort of like the same with heavy line or light line on jerkbaits or crankbaits, the heavier line that you use on a Texas rig or a jig, the slower the fall of that jig or Texas rig is going to be, and the more it glides down at an angle. So If you use light line like on a Texas rig, it's going to fall quicker, more vertical. And if you use heavier line, it's going to fall slower, more to an angle like that. So that's one consideration there. Another thing is lure weight. Most of the time, if you're using a lighter lure, you can get by and you need to use lighter test line. And if you're using a heavier lure, like some of the, for example, I'll show you here, like this big 10-inch Megabass Mag Draft, if I'm using something like this, I can't throw this thing on light line. I've got to have it on heavy line simply because of the weight of the lure. So that's another factor to consider with it. Now, for the most part, when you're talking about line tests, guys, I use a lot of different tests. I'll use anywhere. I've got line, the Invisex. I got 4 pound, 6 pound, 8 pound, 12 pound, 15 pound, 17 pound, 20 pound, and 25 pound tests. Now, and I use all of it for any situation. For the most part, the lighter pound tests, like the 4, 6, and 8, I'm using it for my finesse fishing. I'm using it on, you know, wacky rigs, shaky head worms, Ned rigs, maybe a little bit of crankbait, small crankbaits, maybe sometimes on a jerk bait in clear water. If I'm using line tests, like say 10 to 15 pound tests, that's sort of my workhorse range. Those lures are fished a lot on like you know, different type of crankbaits fall into that category. And if I'm using over 15 pound test line, like 17, 20, 25 pound tests, I'm usually using it on a large heavy lure like this, or something like a jig or a worm that I'm fishing in and around heavy cover with. But anyway, guys, that's the main sort of just a guideline on line size. You want to get a fine line. There's a fine line between using too heavy line and not heavy enough. And in general, you want to use the heaviest line that you can that does not affect your ability to generate strikes or affects how your action of your lure works. And that just gives you a better chance of landing the fish if you can have a little bit heavier line on there. But you don't want it heavy enough where it takes away the amount of strikes you get or the lure action on there. So just experiment with it, guys. That's sort of the foundation I'll give you, and we'll check in later. See you.